So, how y'all doing? It's Jared. It's a Falcon Tactical fixed blade ring dagger. And I got really excited when I saw this thing in the store because it's like an socp ripoff, But it's not truly a ripoff, It's not actually trying to steal the design of the socp. It's stealing the functionality, and it is kind of jacking the design, honestly, a little bit. But it's not stealing the brand, It doesn't say Benchmade on it, and it doesn't have any... it's really not, you can't ever sell this as an SOCP knife, but, SOCP dagger specifically in itself, but it still functions the correct way, This is a tactical ice pick. It's excellent for the same purpose that the SOCP is so good. It's so quick to access, it's easy to carry, it's really lightweight, and it makes an excellent defensive option. And this knife fits that build. And it's $30. I paid less than that for it, but you can find it online for about $35. And so, really, how neat and how fine do you need a tactical ice pick to be? I mean, really, it just needs to be pointy and durable enough to get the job done. And this knife fits that build. It does it excellently. It is finished horribly well. I don't know if you saw horribly, well, not horribly well, that doesn't even make sense, but it's finished horribly. And I don't know if you saw the video that I did. It's look for flaws and you'll probably find them. And this knife is a key example of that. And because if you look at the actual grind on this thing, you can see the corner here, that little edge bevel comes down. It's just a smaller edge bevel, and on this side, it's much broader and it's at a different angle. And then you come to the other side, and this actually has a little transition there, and then this meets up better in the middle in this side. This side isn't even in the middle at all. This is kind of more in the middle, but they're at different angles. And then the actual center ridge here on this dagger profile blade coming down doesn't even close to meet up to the tip. It's way off the tip on that side, and still pretty far off on this side, but it's not as bad. And so, I mean, that actually gives a little bit of a positive influence over the actual knife itself, because what this does, that center ridge coming down, and with this really shallow hollow grind that this blade has got, it re-tapers down, right? On the other side of this front ridge, the blade is tapering again. And so it leads to this tip being ultra thin, which is a positive and a negative, because if this is going to penetrate into material really, really well. It's a very stabby little design, but it's not going to stab through hard material very well because that tip is probably just going to break off. This thing's advertised as 440. It's 440A or B, maybe a 440C, USA designed, handcrafted in China. You can see that there, and I believe all of that. USA design, I wonder if they're actually talking about the SOCP. It may be Greg Thompson here that they're actually referring to as the designer itself. And then, handcrafted in China, I completely believe, because nobody's going to be able to come up with a machining process to, actually cut out a piece of steel that has this many defects, so I do believe, handcrafted in China, that's probably all true right there. And you can see that it's a stamped piece of metal, because this side's a little bit rounded off, and there's that beat up just right there on the edge, and then this is, you can see the transition there. It's not round at all. It's got a whole bunch of little transitions in it, and the same thing with the inside of this thing. So it's really not finished well, which for the price, it's not exactly cheap. It's inexpensive, because the SOCP here, you're talking about a $110 knife, $100, $95 knife sometimes. You can get into like the Boca Gitbo here, which is another knife that's kind of along that same styling, I really like this, the Boca Gitbo. I'm a fan of this one, but it's still like a $75 knife, $65, $75 knife, so it's not cheap. And this one in comparison, coming in at that $30, $35 price point, it's half the cost. It really is a cheaper option. It's still not incredibly cheap, because $35 is still $35, but I mean, it gives the, that ability. There's still this offering on the market. I really like the fact that this is available, and this form of knife is starting to become more popular, because I'm starting to see a lot more of these. There's a couple custom makers that have some of these ring blade daggers that are just freaking beautiful. I mean, there's some custom work out there that's, it's really good. There's a lot of different companies coming out with this kind of style of knife. Spartan Blades actually makes a dedicated SOCP in itself, and so I really like the fact that this is here. This just makes me happy that I actually saw this thing in the store, and I actually, they're coming out onto the market. It's just a really good indicator for where this style of knife is going in the future in the knife industry. I definitely like that. But edge on here is not the factory edge. That is my edge. You give it a little bit of polish, you can actually see it there. If I can rub the fingerprints off of it. It's not the factory edge, and it has held up okay. I don't know if you can see that there. There's a little bit of rolls and there's a little bit of chipping on there, but it's still a functional edge. That's a piece of tree. That's probably a little bit of sap or something that's stuck on there. I don't actually think that that's rust. And the serrations themselves, you can see whatever this coating is. It's like a paint. I'm not quite sure. I thought it was originally acid etch, but I think it's actually some kind of spray-on paint coating, something like that. But the serrations themselves were actually cut before that was done. You can see that they're painted, right? And so the serrations were actually cut in there before whatever process that was, and it dulled the crap out of those serrations. Look at this. See how hard I'm pushing my thumb in there and wiggling it? I should never be able to do that with serration, with any blade. You know what I mean? I should not be able to do that. So those really aren't functional, and that does lead to the major negative I see with this overall design, besides the fact that tip is so damn thin, it may just snap off, which making this knife kind of pointless. If that tip actually does break off, then you're just out of your tactical ice pick. But at the same time, when you go into material, the retracting out with these serrations not being sharp, this side isn't as much of a concern because it is still radius. It's still going to slip off material. It may hook clothing, may hook loose material, things like that when you're on a retracting motion. But these serrations here coming out, heavy denim jacket, something like that, heavier material, if you can't this blade actually pulling it out of material, there is a chance that these serrations are just going to cause a snag and you could get this knife actually stuck in something, which isn't very good, because if you're actually stabbing at something, it's probably going to be alive, it's probably going to be a person, and if you're stabbing at a person, you really, really don't want your knife to get stuck in them. That's just not a good thing. So having the serrations here and having them not be sharp and actually not able to cut on their way out, because if it could cut material, it wouldn't be nearly as much of a concern. But with as dull as this is and as aggressive as they're shaped, it's going to be really hard to sharpen those. You can see just how aggressive the serrations they are. So that's the one major hit that I can give this knife, as well as the sheath itself. The sheath is, again, it's very reminiscent of that SOCP kind of style of knife. I mean, you can see that they're they're directly going for this in comparison here. And the sheath is decent. It's a much cheaper material. It's some kind of cheap plastic, and the pocket clip has no retention. The pocket clip on the SOCP could be better. Honestly, this could have a little bit better retention. You can see it's still, it's still a decently strong retention. I can hook that into my boot and actually use this as a boot knife, and the sheath will stay. I can pull the knife out reliably, and the sheath will stay in basically every time. It may shift a little bit, and I do still tie it down if I'm actually using that in my boot. I'll run a little piece of cord actually through here and then through the loop on my boot so that I can actually pull it out. It's the same thing if I'm carrying it in my pocket or my belt line. I will tie the SOCP sheath down. Sorry about that, my phone's doing something. But I will tie that sheath down just so that it actually, I don't have to worry about that. But that's necessary with this sheath. It's not necessary 100% with the SOCP, but it is necessary with this, because the retention that this sheath has is actually really strong. It's heavy. You can see that, it doesn't want to come out because it's got this little lip here. There's actually this little tab coming over and, hooking onto the actual inside of this ring. And so that gives you a good retention. There is actually a good snap fit there. And as well, the sheath itself has a lot of pressure. There's a friction fit between the actual knife and the sheath itself because of that little tab dragging on there, and it's forcing it down, so it's squeezing it, right? And so there's a whole lot of actual retention into the sheath, if I can quit hitting my tripod, that makes it, it's good for the fact that the knife isn't going to go anywhere. It's not going to pop out, especially if you're running, moving around, things like that. You don't have as much of a risk of the knife flying out unexpectedly. But at the same time, this is a very, to steal a term, high-speed, low-drag kind of knife. That's really what this is. This is kind of that tactical ice pick style of knife. And not being able to have it as readily pop out of the sheath as quickly and as easily come out of the sheath and deploy isn't necessarily the best thing. So the sheath does take a little bit of a workaround, but at the same time, it covers up the whole knife It is thin enough, it's light enough that you can pack it into different areas. You can pack this into your pocket and only have a little bit of ring sticking out of your top of your pocket. It does function. It works well for what it's actually intended to do. It's just got a little bit of too much retention, which I can't complain about, because I would rather take too much retention over too little in the grand scheme of things. I'll actually show you the box here. This is Falcon Tactical, the edge you can count on. You can see I paid $20 for it. It's a little bit more than that online. It's $30 to $35 generally, what you see most of the time online. The box has nothing in it. Just a little piece of plastic. Actually came wrapped around the knife, but that's it. Falcon Tactical Fixed Blade Ring Dagger. USA design, handmade in China. I wonder what that means. Y'all have a good one.